Rock Book Show. I'm Kimberly Austin, and joining me today, just happened to stop by here in New York City, Mac Randall. I know. What train did you take to get here?
I actually walked because I live within walking distance of here. It's pretty easy.
Yeah, you're a good New Yorker. And Mac has updated this great book that he wrote actually 12 years ago. Is that right?
That's just about right. Yeah, 2000 it came out originally.
Your book is called Exit Music. It's the Radiohead story. Mac, why did you decide to update the book instead of just writing a new one?
Well, I was pretty happy with the book as it originally was, and it's interesting. It's come out in a number of different countries and in different languages, and the other territories in Europe and Japan and so forth, they seem to be much more into the idea of doing revised editions in general. The U.S. publisher, the original U.S. publisher of the book, wasn't really so keen on it. But now it's been 12 years and we happen to get ourselves a new U.S. publisher, and they're like, well, will you update it for us? And it's like, okay, sure. So I was happy to go back and do it, revise some things. Obviously, 12 years go by, you kind of need to do that. But it was fun to delve back into it after all this time.
And Radiohead, of course, is a notoriously private band. How difficult does that make this process?
It makes it a little difficult. I mean, the original version of the book, which came out in 2000, drew on interviews that I did with them. I did a number of interviews with all the different members of the band back in the 90s, back when they were giving more interviews than they do now. At that time, I got in touch with their management and I said, I'm thinking about doing this book. Would you be interested in helping out? And their stance basically was, you can go ahead and do it, talk to whoever you want, but we're not taking any part in it, any further part in it beyond what you've already done. So I was like, okay. So I went ahead, I went to England and I knocked on doors and talked to people where they grew up and talked to a bunch of different folks who'd worked with them along the way. And it seemed like a decent enough book for that time. Their stance has pretty much not changed about doing a book since then. So that makes updating it a little more difficult because you're talking with people who are outside the loop and you're not talking to the real inner circle of management. And it's a very small inner circle. That's interesting about them. They don't have a lot of hangers-on. They've kept things very small and private, and they definitely reward loyalty, and that's, I think, part of the reason why they've stuck together and they have a really tight-knit group. I mean, it's remarkable when you think about it, and there's hardly any other band that matches their track record of having the exact same personnel for over 20 years now. I mean, I think U2 is about the only one that beats them at this point.
Yeah, and you mentioned that in the book, and I found that really interesting. Do you see any parallels between the band or any lessons other bands can learn?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, U2 were clearly an influence that I don't know how much they'd want to own up to that even now, but it's definitely there. It's definitely in the music, along with a lot of other stuff. And I think there was a point, I seem to recall Bono saying something at one point, it was like something along the lines of Radiohead, they could claim our throne, they could be the next band. And I think he was a little disappointed when they chose not to do that at all and go in a completely different direction. But
I thought you were going to say because he still really wants to be a rock star. Come on.
Well, yeah, he does. He does, and so I think in that sense, he is very happy that they've stayed out of his territory. But yeah, I think U2 and REM was another hugely influential band on them, and that idea of just staying true to your muse and not letting other people push you around. And just staying as creative and forward-thinking as you can. I think that's really the lesson they've taken from those bands, and that's a good lesson for people coming up too.
It's a great lesson, and it kind of reminds me of the story that you start the book with at the Tibetan concert. It was down at Irving Plaza, is that right? 97. But why did you start the book with that concert?
Well, I just thought it was very interesting that here they were, they'd had a big hit with Creep already, But now with OK Computer, they had gotten past the point where people could say that they were a one-hit wonder. This was a serious band, and all these people were taking notice. All these very famous people, including people who had been their own idols. And here they were. This was this showcase moment in front of them, and they really, they didn't choke. They totally went for it. And it was a fantastic show, and it was really amazing thinking back about how many really famous musicians and other cultural people were there at that show, and it really was a turning point for them.
Would you still say one of the defining moments of their career, probably?
I would say so, and what's interesting is that after OK Computer, that tour was such a big blowout for them, and Tom York in particular decided, I don't want to do anything like that again. I don't want to be this stadium phenomenon. It's just not my thing. And so you could say that this was also, that show was the beginning of a possible other way for them. It was an indication of what they could have turned into. At the time I wrote the book, originally, it looked like they might still be that. Of course, now looking back on it, it's almost like a what might have been kind of moment. Not that they haven't been extremely successful and influential, and probably the reason why the band still is together now is because they didn't go that way. They didn't join the celebrity culture in the same way as some of the other people at that show were a part of that. But it's still a really interesting bridge point, between one phase of the band and another phase of the band.
Yeah, and another turning point in the phases of the band is the internet, and they were one of the first bands to really capitalize on that, and with King of Limbs especially. Talk about how that process worked.
Well, it's interesting. They were. It's wrong to say that they were pioneers, because the real pioneer, who doesn't get as much credit as he should, and who is, I think there's a kind of embarrassed feeling about it in some way, is Prince. He was really the pioneer of it, but Radiohead did not do it quite as soon, so they were able to benefit from learning from other people's mistakes, like Prince's mistakes. But it really is amazing how it has transformed the way the band interacts with its audience, or doesn't, as it chooses to, and how it's made its music available. I mean, the In Rainbows thing was when they said that they were going to put the album up for sale, and they were going to make it available, and you could pay whatever you wanted to pay for it. Was it a gimmick? Yeah, it absolutely was a gimmick. We still don't know, because they've kept those numbers private, how it really worked. Was it a success? There's a lot of estimates. I suspect that if it had really worked, they would have done the same thing again with this album, and they did not. But it did serve its purpose, and it certainly did not harm them. I mean, they're luckily in a position where they could do experiments like that.
And their audience is so loyal to them, yet they don't really make their music for the audience necessarily. The audience really has to invest in it. How is it that Radiohead is one of those very few bands that's able to walk that fine line of hipster, commercial, Grammy winner, critics darling, commercial success? How do they do that?
Right. It's an interesting balancing act, and I think it's one of those things where they've tapped into a core group of people who they're not necessarily, they don't necessarily love mainstream music, but they don't despise it as well. They're willing to give it a chance, but they want to have that sense of community, but they also want to be seen as adventurous. And I think that really it taps into people's, a couple of different pleasure centers, and that way it's a community, and yet we're kind of hip and cool, but we're not too hip and cool. We're not like Prince pioneering the internet. We're not like, I mean, we're influenced by the Warp Records catalog, but we weren't making records like those electronic artists were doing exactly. It's really, they've managed to make this interesting distillation, you know, of the left field and the conventional, and they're doing it again on this tour. You know, King of Limbs, I kind of had a hard time with, and I even say in the book, I think it's the first album of theirs you can really say is kind of an underwhelming record, even though it's good. For them, good is kind of down here as opposed to up here. But then, as they always do, they found a way to reinvent the music. They made it alive, you know, the product of a live organism as opposed to this very hermetically sealed studio creation. And what do you know? It sounds great, and people are just raving about it. And I'm not surprised, because that's what they're so good at doing.
Yeah, they really are. What was your biggest surprise when you looked back at this material?
What I was surprised about was to read you kind of look back at the early story of theirs, and just see how committed they were to each other and to being a band and to making a real go of it from so early on. That's what you need to have. But it's interesting to see that with the story of any band, I guess. But they have really stuck with it. So that's what makes it all the more, I don't know if it's surprising, but maybe more inspiring, I guess, than anything else. But just to see that you know, they all went off to college, and you would have thought that if anything is going to splinter, that's the time it's going to splinter. But no, they all came back and they did it, and we said, we're going to get signed, and we're going to do our own thing eventually. It took a little while to where they really got to do their own thing, but they did. And it really is, that part of the story is still very interesting to me.
And your favorite personal Radiohead moment?
My favorite personal Radiohead moment? Well, I mean, that's tough. I mean, going to Barcelona to be present for the kind of official launch of OK Computer in 1997 was pretty cool. I was one of only 2 American journalists who went. I mean, it was still a media frenzy because they had people from all over the world going there. But to talk to them at that particular time and to see them play and just get this glimpse of, again, similar to the Irving Plaza show, of the future, you know. But it was a great moment, and something far more recent. They've done now for the last 2 records. They've done these from the basement recordings that they just kind of go into a room, they set up, and they do the new record live. And they did that with King of Limbs. And after having spent a lot of time with King of Limbs, and saying, as I said before, it's good, but it's not quite there. To actually see that broadcast and to see how they transform those songs, and to realize they're not close to being done. You know, this is obviously just, the process is just continuing. And they have really transformed these songs in such an exciting way. That was something that was really encouraging and exciting to see.
It's very cool, because you don't get those goosebumps from every band that's still out there after 20 years. Mac Randall, the author of Exit Music. I'm going to pick up the book. This is the book, Exit Music, the Radiohead Story. Thank you for updating it, and I hope, I'll see you again in 12 years.
Well, if fingers crossed.
Thank you, Mac.